Have you ever had that feeling? That tiny whisper in the back of your mind telling you something isn't right? I ignored mine for years. Until one morning, I woke up to discover my husband of 12 years had emptied our joint savings account. $320,000. Gone in a single transaction. As I stared at my phone screen, hands shaking, I realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal, the lies, and the careful facade we'd both maintained for far too long. But what Daniel didn't know was that I had been silently preparing for this moment for years. This is the story of how I lost everything, and then got it all back, with interest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I used to love mornings. There's something peaceful about watching the first light filter through kitchen blinds, hearing the neighborhood gradually wake up while nursing that first cup of coffee. Our craftsman-style house in Westlake's Hillcrest neighborhood had the perfect breakfast nook for it. A small bay window overlooking manicured gardens and a glimpse of the lake in the distance. That particular Tuesday morning started like any other. I woke up at 5:30, carefully slid out of bed without disturbing Daniel, and padded down to the kitchen in my slippers. He'd been coming home later and later from client dinners, and I didn't want to wake him. Such consideration seems laughable to me now. I was scrolling through my emails with one hand, coffee mug in the other, when my phone pinged with a bank notification. I almost ignored it. God, how I wish sometimes that I had, just for a few more hours of normalcy. But 16 years in financial analysis had trained me to pay attention to money alerts, so I tapped it open. Confirmation, transfer complete. Amount, $320,000. I blinked, certain I was misreading. That was impossible. That figure represented our entire joint savings account, our emergency fund, our future investment capital, the money we'd painstakingly accumulated through bonuses, inheritances, and year after year of careful planning. My heart began racing as I logged into our bank account, fingers trembling so badly I mistyped the password twice. The balance confirmed my worst fear, $372. 14 remained. My first thought was fraud. It had to be. I immediately called the bank's fraud department, pacing our kitchen floor as the representative pulled up our account information. I'm showing this transfer was authorized yesterday at 3:42 p.m. using the correct online credentials and security verification, she explained calmly. It was transferred to an account at Pacific Trust under the name Daniel Chen. Is that familiar to you, Mrs. Chen? The room seemed to tilt sideways. Daniel had moved our entire savings to a private account in his name only. My mouth went dry as I thanked the representative and ended the call. I sat down before my legs gave out, the realization washing over, me in waves. This wasn't random fraud. This was calculated betrayal. I checked the time. 6:15 a.m. Daniel wouldn't be up for at least another hour. My mind raced through possibilities. Confrontation, tears, explanations. But something deeper and more calculating took over. 16 years at Meridian Financial had taught me that emotional decisions are rarely the best ones. And somewhere beneath the shock, a small voice reminded me that I had seen this coming. Not this exact scenario, perhaps, but something like it. Daniel and I had met during graduate school, both ambitious and career-focused. He was charming, driven, and charismatic, qualities that helped him rise quickly through the ranks at Nova Marketing Group. I was equally successful as a financial analyst, eventually becoming senior advisor at Meridian Financial. We were the power couple our friends admired. Compatible, financially secure, seemingly perfect. But perfect things rarely are when you look closely enough. The small inconsistencies had been accumulating for years. Unexplained absences, defensive reactions to innocent questions, increasing secrecy about his phone, and a gradual emotional withdrawal that I had rationalized away with the pressures of our demanding careers. His position as marketing director required travel and late nights after all. My own 60-hour work weeks meant we often passed like ships in the night. 3 years ago, I found the first lipstick smudge on his collar. Such a cliché, I almost laughed when I saw it. When confronted, he had a plausible explanation involving a tearful client at a restaurant. I chose to believe him. 6 months later, there was an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his suit jacket. Another explanation, another choice to believe. But I wasn't as naive as Daniel thought. Each incident catalyzed a quiet awakening in me, and I began taking precautions. Small ones at first, maintaining my separate checking account after we'd agreed to combine finances, keeping digital copies of all our financial statements, ensuring my name was on the house deed. Then larger ones, opening a private savings account, securing my own retirement funds independent of our joint planning, quietly building a network of professional contacts outside our shared social circle. I didn't want to believe my marriage was failing, but I wasn't going to be left destitute if it did. Now, as I sat in our kitchen with the devastating confirmation of my suspicions glowing on my phone screen, I felt an unexpected calm descend. I had prepared for this. Not consciously, perhaps, but the groundwork had been laid. I heard movement upstairs. Daniel was awake. I quickly closed the banking app and opened my work email instead, my heart pounding but my face composed. When he entered the kitchen minutes later, I handed him a cup of coffee without meeting his eyes, afraid my expression would give everything away. "Morning," he said, kissing my cheek absently. "I've got that breakfast meeting with the Westco team, so I'll be out early." I nodded, studying him over the rim of my mug. Did he look guilty? Nervous? There was nothing unusual in his demeanor. The same Daniel I'd woken up beside for 12 years. The same man who had, apparently, just stolen our life savings. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Patels on Friday," I reminded him, my voice impressively steady. "About that," he frowned, checking his watch. "I might need to reschedule. The Chicago campaign is hitting some snags, and I might have to fly out this weekend." Another lie, so casually delivered. How many had there been over the years? Hundreds? Thousands? I nodded again, playing my part in this charade one last time. "No problem. I'll let Kate know." He gathered his things, gave me another distracted kiss, and headed for the door. I watched him go, wondering if he had any idea what I was about to do. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I sprang into action. First, I called my office and took a personal day, something I'd done perhaps 3 times in my entire career. Then I called Rebecca Torres, my closest colleague and friend at Meridian. "Emily, everything okay?" Rebecca's concern was immediate. She knew my work ethic too well to think this was casual. "I need advice," I said, my voice finally breaking. "And I need discretion." "I'll be at Harborview Coffee in 20 minutes. While waiting to meet Rebecca, I made 2 more calls. The first was to Eleanor Wright, my former boss who had retired from Meridian 2 years ago. She had mentored me through my entire career and was now running a financial advisory firm specializing in high-net-worth divorce cases. The second call was to Jason Patel, a family law attorney whose children attended the same school as Rebecca's kids. Both agreed to meet me the following day. Eleanor heard something in my voice that made her clear her afternoon schedule, and Jason, though technically not taking new clients, made an exception based on Rebecca's referral. By the time I arrived at Harborview Coffee, I had compiled a list of every financial account, property, and asset Daniel and I shared, along with approximate values and whose name was attached to each. It was surprisingly easy. Financial organization had always been my domain in our marriage. Daniel had been content to let me handle the details as long as he maintained spending freedom. Rebecca was already waiting in a corner booth, 2 lattes on the table. One look at my face, and she slid hers toward me. "You need this more than I do." "What happened?" I showed her the bank notification. Her eyes widened. He just took it? All of it? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Every penny. She exhaled slowly. Do you think he knows that you know? Not yet. He was completely normal this morning. Rebecca had met Daniel dozens of times at company functions and dinner parties. She'd always been politely reserved around him, and now I understood why. She'd seen something I hadn't, or hadn't wanted to. You think there's someone else? She said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I've suspected for a while, but this... I gestured to my phone. This isn't just an affair. This is calculated. You don't empty joint savings unless you're planning something drastic. Like leaving the country with his mistress, Rebecca suggested, or buying her something extremely expensive. A house, maybe. The thought made me feel physically ill. Our house, the one we'd spent 3 years renovating, had been my dream home. The idea that he might be setting up another woman in a similar love nest with our money was almost too much to bear. What are you going to do? That depends, I said, taking a deep breath. On what I find out today. After leaving Rebecca, I drove to Nova Marketing Group's gleaming office tower downtown. I'd been there countless times for holiday parties and events, but today, I parked in the visitor section and pulled a baseball cap low over my face before entering. The security guard barely glanced at me as I signed in as a delivery person for the 14th floor, one below Daniel's department. I took the elevator up, my pulse racing. What I was about to do fell into an ethical gray area, but the $320,000 theft had obliterated my concerns about playing fair. In the 15th floor ladies' room, I encountered exactly who I'd hoped to find. Janet Wheeler, Daniel's administrative assistant for the past 5 years. Emily! She looked startled to see me. Is everything okay? Daniel didn't mention you were coming by. Surprise visit, I smiled tightly. Actually, Janet, I could use your help with something. Janet had always been friendly to me, occasionally, sending birthday cards and remembering our anniversary when Daniel himself forgot. I suspected she knew more about my husband's activities than I did. Daniel asked me to pick up his travel itinerary for this weekend's Chicago trip, but he didn't. Send me the details. Would you have a copy? Janet's expression shifted subtly. Discomfort, perhaps even pity. Chicago trip? For the Wesco campaign issues, I prompted. She hesitated. Emily, there's no Chicago trip on his schedule. The Wesco campaign wrapped up last month. The confirmation was both expected and devastating. I kept my smile fixed. In place. That's strange. Maybe I misunderstood. While I'm here, could I borrow his office for a quick call? My phone's about to die. Janet looked conflicted, but ultimately nodded. He's in meetings off-site all day. Use my desk if you'd like. I'm heading to lunch now anyway. Perfect. Once Janet left, I slipped into Daniel's corner office. I had 20 minutes at most before someone might question my presence. The room was immaculate. Daniel had always been fastidiously organized in his work life, if nothing else. His computer was locked, but I didn't need it. Instead, I went straight to his credenza, slid open the bottom drawer, and felt along the back edge. Daniel was a creature of habit, and sure enough, taped to the back was a small key. He'd kept a spare house key hidden the same way in graduate school. The key opened his private filing cabinet. I quickly leafed through folders, snapping photos with my phone when I found anything relevant. Most were innocuous business documents, but in a folder marked Personal Investments, I struck gold. Statements for the Pacific Trust account the bank representative had mentioned, opened 6 months ago with an initial deposit of $50,000. I photographed every page, my hands shaking with anger and vindication. The most recent statement showed a balance of $127,000 before today's massive transfer. He'd been siphoning money for months. But the real revelation came in a thin manila folder at the very back, unmarked except for a small red dot in the corner. Inside was a rental agreement for a luxury apartment in Riverpoint Towers, the exclusive building overlooking Westlake Harbor, under the names Daniel Chen and Vanessa Mills. The monthly rent was $6,800, and according to the document, they had taken occupancy 4 months ago. Vanessa Mills. My husband had been living a double life with a woman named Vanessa Mills. I photographed the rental agreement, then carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it. My heart was pounding so loudly I was certain someone would hear it echoing down the hallway, but I forced myself to move methodically, leaving no trace of my investigation. Just as I locked the filing cabinet and returned the key to its hiding place, my phone buzzed with a text message. From Daniel. Coming back to the office early. Need to pick up some files. You free for lunch? I froze, adrenaline surging. He never asked me to lunch on weekdays. Had Janet mentioned seeing me? Was he testing me? I texted back, in meetings all day. Rain check? Then I slipped out of his office, nodded goodbye to the receptionist, and took the stairs down 2 flights before catching the elevator to the ground floor, terrified of running into him. It wasn't until I was safely in my car that I allowed myself to breathe. I had what I needed, proof of his deception and the name of the woman he was apparently planning a future with using our money. Vanessa Mills. I pulled out my phone and searched the name along with Westlake. The results appeared immediately. Vanessa Mills, 31, owner of Pure Intention Yoga Studio in downtown Westlake. Her website featured a stunning woman with caramel-colored hair demonstrating a complex yoga pose, her athletic body showcased in expensive activewear. According to her bio, she specialized in private instruction for discerning clients seeking physical and spiritual transformation. I stared at her image, searching for some sign of the moral bankruptcy that would allow her to accept stolen money, to participate in destroying a 12-year marriage. But her face revealed nothing except serene confidence and the kind of beauty that came from both good genes and expensive maintenance. It took everything in me not to drive straight to her studio and confront her. But the strategic part of my brain, the analyst who had built a career on cool assessment rather than emotional reaction, held me back. I needed more information before making my next move. I drove instead to our bank and spoke directly with the branch manager, Christopher Haynes. I'd had enough professional interactions with him over the years that he agreed to see me immediately. Mrs. Chen, I've reviewed the transaction myself, he said after I explained the situation. I understand your concern, but since Mr. Chen is a joint account holder, he has full legal rights to transfer funds without your signature or approval. There's nothing the bank can do to reverse the transaction. I understand that, I said carefully, but I'd like to remove his access to all my personal accounts immediately. Christopher's expression softened with something like sympathy. He'd been in banking long enough to recognize the signs of a marriage in crisis. Of course, we can do that right away. By the time I left the bank, Daniel had been removed from my personal checking account and credit cards, and I had opened a new savings account in my name only, transferring the modest emergency fund I'd been quietly building from my private, online account. It wasn't much compared to what we'd lost, just $43,000, but it was something, a foundation to build from. My phone had been buzzing periodically with texts from Daniel, each more concerned than the last. Just tried calling. Your office. They said you took the day off. Everything okay? Emily? Getting worried. Where are you? Please call me when you get this. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to Lakeshore Park and sat on a bench overlooking the water, trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a single morning. My marriage was over, had been over for longer than I'd admitted to myself. My husband had stolen our savings to fund a life with another woman. I was angry, yes, but also strangely liberated. The constant anxiety of suspecting but not knowing had been exhausting. As the afternoon light softened over the lake, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not out of desperation, but release. When the tears subsided, I felt clearer than I had in years. I knew what I needed to do. I called Eleanor Wright. I need every resource you have on high-conflict divorce and hidden assets, I said when she answered. I'm coming in tomorrow, but I want to be prepared tonight. What's happened? Eleanor's voice was sharp with concern. Daniel emptied our joint savings, $320,000. I found evidence he's been planning to leave, apartment in River Point with another woman, secret bank account. I need to know my options. There was a brief silence. Then Eleanor's voice came back, steel beneath the gentleness. First, document everything. Bank statements, property records, tax returns, anything financial from the last 5 years. Second, don't confront him yet. That's crucial, Emily. Once he knows you know, he'll start covering his tracks. I've already gathered most of it. I've kept copies of everything important for years. Smart girl, Eleanor said, and I could hear the approval in her voice. I always said you were the most strategic mind at Meridian. Why do you think I recommended you as my replacement when I retired? I managed a small laugh. Not feeling particularly strategic right now. Don't sell yourself short. Most people in your situation would be falling apart. You're already taking action. She paused. Emily, I have to ask. Do you want to try to save this marriage? Couples therapy? Mediation? The question caught me off guard. Did I? After everything I'd discovered today? He stole our life savings? To set up a love nest with a yoga instructor, I said flatly. I think we're beyond couples therapy. Fair enough. Then we move to protection mode. I'll see you tomorrow at 2. Try to get some sleep tonight, and whatever you do, don't tip your hand to Daniel yet. The element of surprise is the only advantage you have right now. After hanging up, I checked the time. It was after 6. I had been out all day, and Daniel would definitely be home by now, probably wondering where I was. I had to face him eventually. The question was, could I maintain the facade of normalcy when I knew everything? I had to try. For now, at least. I drove home slowly, rehearsing what I would say, how I would act. By the time I pulled into our driveway, darkness had fallen, and lights blazed from every window of our Craftsman home. Daniel's car was parked haphazardly, as if he'd been in a hurry. As I approached the front door, I took a deep breath and arranged my features into a mask of casual exhaustion. He was pacing in the living room when I entered, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, relief washed over his face. He ended his call mid-sentence and rushed toward me. Emily, where have you been? I've been calling you all day. The concern in his voice seemed genuine, which only made everything worse. How could he sound so worried about me while systematically destroying our life together? Sorry, I said, keeping my voice neutral. My phone died and I needed some time to think. Work has been overwhelming lately. The lies came easily, too easily perhaps. Had I learned that from him? You took a personal day? You never take personal days. He was studying my face intently, searching for clues. Are you sick? Just tired, I replied, moving past him toward the kitchen. I needed a mental health break. You've been telling me to take one for months, remember? I could feel him watching me, uncertain. This wasn't like me, and he knew it. But I also knew he couldn't press too hard without revealing his own deceptions. I was worried, he said, following me. When I couldn't reach you at work, and then you weren't answering your phone. Why would you call me at work? I told you this morning I had meetings all day. The trap was small but effective. I watched him recalibrate. Right, of course. With you not feeling well, I thought maybe you'd canceled them. I busied myself getting a glass of water, not trusting my expression. "How was your day? Any progress on the Chicago situation?" He hesitated, almost imperceptibly. "It's complicated. We might need to push the trip back a week or two." More lies. I nodded as if this made perfect sense. "I'm going to take a shower and head to bed early," I said, not waiting for his response. "I've got an early start tomorrow." In our bedroom, I gathered my pajamas and retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. Only then did I let my composure crack, leaning against the sink and staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow, harder around the edges, eyes sharper. Or maybe that was just the clarity of finally seeing the truth. I showered for a long time, letting the hot water wash away the day's emotions. By the time I emerged, Daniel was sitting on the edge of our bed, still fully dressed, looking troubled. "Emily," he began, his voice gentle in a way I once found endearing. "Is everything okay between us?" The question was so breathtakingly audacious that I almost laughed. Was everything okay between us? While he was signing a rental agreement? With his girlfriend? While he was emptying our savings account? Why would you ask that? I kept my tone curious, non-confrontational. "You seem distant lately." "Today, especially." I sat beside him, careful to maintain a natural distance. "I'm just stressed with work. The Peterson portfolio is taking up all my mental energy." Another lie. The Peterson account had been completed weeks ago. He nodded, seeming relieved at this simple explanation. Part of me wanted to scream the truth, to demand answers about Vanessa Mills and the money and the months, years, of deception. But Eleanor's warning echoed in my mind. The element of surprise is the only advantage you have. "I understand," he said, reaching for my hand. "You work too hard. Maybe we should plan a vacation soon. Just the two of us." The tenderness in his voice made my stomach turn. Was it possible he hadn't decided yet? Was he still weighing his options, playing both sides? Or was this just more manipulation? "That sounds nice," I managed. "Let's talk about it this weekend." He smiled, apparently satisfied that whatever had bothered me was resolved. "I'll let you get some sleep." As he left the room, presumably, to continue working downstairs as he often did in the evenings, I lay back on our bed and stared at the ceiling. How many more nights would I spend in this house? In this marriage? The uncertainty should have terrified me, but instead, I felt an unfamiliar sense of control. For years, I had been reacting to Daniel's behavior, adjusting, accommodating, making excuses. Today, for the first time, I had taken action. Tomorrow, I would take more, and the day after that, even more. Daniel had spent our life savings on his girlfriend, but I had been preparing for years. Not consciously, perhaps, but preparing nonetheless. Building my career, maintaining my independence, quietly securing my own financial safety nets. He thought he held all the cards, but he'd miscalculated badly. I closed my eyes, mentally reviewing my appointments for tomorrow. Eleanor at 2, Jason Patel at 4. The first steps in reclaiming my life. The first steps in making Daniel realize exactly what he had thrown away, and exactly who he had underestimated. Sleep never came that night. I lay beside Daniel, listening to his even breathing, wondering how he could rest so peacefully after what he'd done. Each time his arm brushed against mine, I had to resist the urge to recoil. The familiar warmth of his body now felt like a betrayal in itself. I slipped out of bed at 4:30 a.m., long before the alarm. The house was silent as I dressed in the dark, selecting my most confidence-boosting outfit, a charcoal gray suit I reserved for high-stakes client meetings. Today would require every ounce of composure I could muster. In the kitchen, I prepared coffee and reviewed my plan for the day. First, the office. I needed to maintain appearances and address any urgent work before my afternoon appointments. Then Eleanor at 2, Jason Patel at 4. By evening, I would have a clearer picture of my options. Daniel found me there an hour later, already showered and dressed, typing emails at the kitchen island. "You're up early," he remarked, reaching past me for a coffee mug. His casual domesticity seemed obscene after what I now knew. "Big day," I replied without elaborating. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up." He looked surprised. I usually provided detailed schedules of my whereabouts, but nodded. "I have client dinners anyway. The Anderson campaign launch, remember?" Another lie. I wondered if he was meeting Vanessa, if they were celebrating their windfall. The thought made my stomach clench. "Right. Have fun." I gathered my things before he could notice anything amiss in my expression. At the door, he caught my arm gently. "Hey, are we okay?" The question hung between us, weighted with layers he couldn't possibly understand. I met his eyes, those familiar hazel eyes that had once made my heart race, and managed a neutral smile. Of course, just busy. The relief on his face was palpable. He thought I suspected nothing, that his world was still perfectly intact. That miscalculation would be his undoing. The drive to Meridian Financial was automatic, muscle memory, guiding me through morning traffic while my mind raced ahead. Rebecca was waiting by my office door when I arrived, concern evident in her expression. "You look like hell," she said bluntly, following me inside. "Thanks." I set down my bag and collapsed into my chair. "I feel worse." She closed the door. "Did you confront him?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I need more information first." I recounted yesterday's discoveries: the hidden apartment, Vanessa Mills, the Pacific Trust account. Rebecca let out a low whistle. "The apartment is what gets me. That's not an impulsive mistake. That's calculated deception." 4 months. "Of it," I agreed. "Maybe longer." She perched on the edge of my desk. "What's your next move?" "Meeting Eleanor and a divorce attorney today. I need to understand my legal position before I make any decisions." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Smart. What about work? Do you need coverage for anything?" I gestured to my computer. "Just the Anderson portfolio review. It's scheduled for next Wednesday, but I won't be in the headspace to prepare." "Consider it handled. Take whatever time you need." Her loyalty meant more than she could know. In the corporate world, personal crises were often viewed as professional liabilities. But Rebecca and I had weathered market crashes and impossible deadlines together. She wouldn't let me face this alone either. I spent the morning robotically handling emails and client calls, my mind elsewhere. At noon, I slipped out the back, entrance to avoid running into colleagues who might notice my distraction. I couldn't bear well-meaning questions or casual conversation, not today. Eleanor's office was in a renovated Victorian house at the edge of the financial district, its elegant exterior belying the ruthless efficiency within. Her assistant, recognizing me from my Meridian days, ushered me directly to her private conference room. Eleanor Wright was exactly as I remembered, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. She rose to embrace me, her perfume familiar and oddly comforting. "Emily." She held me at arm's length, assessing. "You're handling this remarkably well." "Am I?" It didn't feel that way internally. "You're here, aren't you? Thinking strategically instead of burning his clothes on the front lawn." That startled a laugh from me. "The day's not over yet." Her smile was knowing. "Let's make sure you have better options than arson." For the next hour, we dissected my financial situation, creating a comprehensive inventory of assets, accounts, and potential complications. I had brought copies of everything: tax returns, property deeds, investment statements, retirement accounts, each neatly organized in labeled folders. "Your organizational skills are paying off," Eleanor noted, reviewing the documents. Many people in your situation can't find half these records until it's too late. Financial analyst, I reminded her. Documentation is second nature. She nodded approvingly. Let's summarize what we know. Joint savings of $320,000, now transferred. To Daniel's private account. House in both names. Current market value approximately $850,000. Mortgage balance $420,000. Your retirement accounts total $295,000. His around $340,000. The cars, the art collection, miscellaneous assets. I estimate your marital estate at roughly $4 million, not counting the stolen funds, which I have no access to. For now, Eleanor agreed. But transferring those funds doesn't make them disappear from the marital estate. In fact, it works against him. Judges don't look kindly on spouses who try to hide assets. She pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing. You mentioned your private emergency fund, $43,000. Is Daniel aware of it? No. I opened the account 3 years ago after finding evidence of his first affair. Eleanor looked up sharply. You suspected infidelity that long ago? Suspected, yes. Confirmed, no. It was just a lipstick stain, easily explained away. But it was enough to make me cautious. And this was before the yoga instructor? I shrugged. I don't know. Maybe Vanessa is the only one. Maybe there have been others. The point is, I started protecting myself. Without confronting him, Eleanor observed. I wanted to believe his explanations. We had built a life together. The admission felt like weakness, but Eleanor nodded without judgment. That's common. But now that he's escalated to grand theft, your priorities have shifted. Completely. The word came out harder than I intended. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. Emily, I need to ask an important question. What outcome are you hoping for here? Do you want to maximize your financial settlement? Punish Daniel? Simply move on as quickly as possible? The question caught me off guard. In the whirlwind of discovery and investigation, I hadn't fully articulated my end goal. I paused, considering. I want what's fairly mine. I want him to face consequences for his actions, and I want to ensure he can never do this to me again. Fair, accountable, and final, Eleanor summarized. That's a clear framework to work with. She turned to a new page. Here's what you need to know about high-conflict divorce in Westlake. We're in an equitable distribution state, which means marital assets are divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. Courts consider multiple factors: length of marriage, contributions of each spouse, future earning potential, and, most relevantly in your case, financial misconduct. The $320,000 transfer. Exactly. That's a textbook case of dissipation of marital assets. If we can prove he used that money to benefit his paramour. Paramour, I repeated with a bitter laugh. Such an elegant word for such a sordid situation. Eleanor's expression softened momentarily. The legal terminology helps maintain emotional distance. You'll need that in the months ahead. She continued her outline, explaining the discovery process, temporary orders, mediation requirements, and potential trial scenarios. The legal machinery was complex but navigable with proper guidance. Your meeting with Jason Patel is crucial, she emphasized. He's one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. Aggressive when necessary, but strategic above all. He knows how to deal with hostile spouses who hide assets. Will he take my case? You mentioned he's not accepting new clients. He will for you. I've already briefed him on the situation. I raised an eyebrow. You seem very certain I want a divorce. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. Do you not? The question hung in the air between us. Despite everything, some small part of me mourned for what might have been, the future we had planned, the life we had built. I want what's necessary, I said finally. And after what Daniel has done, I don't see an alternative. There rarely is, once trust has been this thoroughly broken. Eleanor gathered the documents into a neat stack. One more thing before you meet with Jason. Have you secured your personal belongings? Anything irreplaceable or of significant sentimental value? I frowned. No. Should I? Immediately. Once you serve Daniel with divorce papers, all bets are off. Some spouses become vindictive, damaging, or disposing of items they know matter to their partner. The thought of Daniel destroying my grandmother's jewelry or my rare book collection sent a chill through me. I had been focused on financial assets, not considering the personal treasures at risk. I'll handle it today, I promised. Eleanor walked me to the door. Call me after you meet with Jason, and Emily. She gripped my arm gently. Remember that feelings of grief, anger, even temporary paralysis are normal. Allow yourself to experience them, but don't let them drive your decisions. I nodded, grateful for her steadying presence. I won't. The walk to Jason Patel's office took just 10 minutes. The spring afternoon unusually warm. I found myself cataloging details with strange clarity. The cherry blossoms beginning to bloom in the courthouse park, a mother pushing twins in a stroller, an elderly couple holding hands on a bench. Life continuing in its ordinary patterns while mine unraveled. Jason's office occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building, its reception area designed to intimidate with stark modernist furniture and awards displayed in illuminated cases. The message was clear: success at any cost. Jason himself was surprisingly warm in person, shorter than I expected, with quick, intelligent eyes and an easy smile that suggested genuine concern rather than professional courtesy. Emily, thank you for coming in. He ushered me into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Eleanor has briefed me on your situation. I'm very sorry you're going through this. Unlike many platitudes I'd received in my life, his sympathy seemed authentic. I appreciated that he didn't minimize the gravity of what had happened. Thank you for making time. I understand you're not taking new clients currently. For friends of Eleanor, I make exceptions. He settled into a chair across from me. And frankly, cases like yours interest me professionally. Financial concealment requires a particular approach. For the next hour, Jason guided me through the technical aspects of divorce proceedings with remarkable clarity. Where Eleanor had provided the big picture, Jason filled in practical details, jurisdictional requirements, filing procedures, service options, temporary relief motions. Based on what you've told me, we have grounds for emergency orders, he explained. The substantial transfer of funds creates a legitimate concern about dissipation of marital assets. We could potentially freeze accounts, prevent further transfers, even secure living expenses for you while proceedings are underway. The suggestion of financial dependence rankled. I have my income. I don't need support from Daniel. Jason nodded, making a note. Independence is valuable, but don't forfeit what you're legally entitled to out of principle. Taking temporary support doesn't diminish your position. It preserves resources for fair division later. His pragmatism made sense. This wasn't about pride, it was about protection. What timeline are we looking at? I asked. That depends on Daniel's cooperation. Best case, 6 to 8 months for an uncontested divorce with negotiated settlement. If he fights the process, conceals additional assets, or disputes valuation, we could be looking at 12 to 18 months. The prospect of a year-long legal battle exhausted me. And the cost? Jason didn't sugarcoat it. Significant. My retainer is $25,000, and high-conflict cases typically range from $40,000 to $100,000 total, depending on complexity and level of hostility. The figures were staggering but not unexpected. I had built my career helping clients navigate financial realities. Now I needed to apply that same clear-eyed assessment to my own situation. I've prepared documentation of marital assets, I said, sliding a folder across the table. But Daniel has already moved substantial funds. Will that complicate matters? It strengthens our case for misconduct, Jason replied, reviewing my documents. But yes, recovery can be challenging, especially if he's transferred money overseas or converted it to difficult-to-trace assets like cryptocurrency. A thought struck me. Could Vanessa be liable as well? If she knowingly benefited from marital assets? Jason's expression shifted to one of professional calculation. Potentially. Some jurisdictions allow claims against third parties who knowingly receive misappropriated marital property. At minimum, we could depose her about funds she's received. The idea of Vanessa facing legal consequences brought a flicker of satisfaction. Not revenge exactly, but accountability. As our meeting concluded, Jason presented me with a retainer agreement and preliminary paperwork. Review these at home. Don't sign anything yet. This decision shouldn't be rushed. I appreciated his caution, but my mind was already made up. I'll review everything tonight. He walked me to the elevator. One more thing, Emily. Once we file, Daniel will know you've been investigating. He may attempt to access your personal communications, email, bank statements, anything that could give him insight into your strategy. Secure everything immediately. It was the second such warning today. I'll change my passwords tonight. All of them, Jason emphasized. Email, banking, social media, cloud storage, anything he might know or guess. And consider using a different device, one he's never had access to. In the elevator descending to the lobby, I leaned against the wall, suddenly overwhelmed by the practical implications of dismantling a shared life. New passwords, new devices, new bank accounts, new living arrangements. Each change a severing of connections built over 12 years. Outside, the afternoon had slipped into early evening, the spring air cooling as shadows lengthened between buildings. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 2 text messages asking about dinner plans. The ordinary domesticity of his questions felt surreal after spending hours discussing how to legally separate our lives. Instead of responding, I called Rebecca. How did the meetings go? She asked without preamble. Productive but overwhelming. I need a favor. Name it. Can I stay at your place tonight? I need to get some things from the house first, but I don't think I can sleep there after everything. There was a brief pause. You're planning to leave before confronting him? Just temporarily. I need space to think, to plan the next steps. Properly. Jason and Eleanor both advised securing personal valuables before filing for divorce. Things Daniel might damage or dispose of out of spite. Of course you can stay, Rebecca said. Guest room is already made up. Do you want company? When you get your things? I considered it. Having moral support would help, but this felt like something I needed to handle alone. I'll be okay. He texted that he has dinner meetings, so the house should be empty. If you're sure. Text me when you're on your way over. I'll have wine. Waiting. I smiled for what felt like the first time that day. You're a lifesaver. No, I'm a friend. There's a difference. After ending the call, I sat in my car for several minutes, gathering strength for what came next. The familiar drive home felt dreamlike. Streets and landmarks I'd passed thousands of times now bearing a strange new significance. Artifacts of a life I was preparing to leave behind. Our house looked exactly as it always did. Warm lights, glowing behind craftsman windows, spring flowers blooming in carefully tended beds. I'd chosen those particular tulip bulbs last fall, planning for a future I now knew had already been compromised. The garage was empty. Daniel was indeed out, presumably with clients or perhaps with Vanessa. I didn't allow myself to dwell on which. Instead, I moved with purpose, heading directly to our shared home office. The filing cabinet yielded what I expected: duplicates of financial records I already had, property documentation, insurance, policies. I selected anything potentially useful and transferred it to my briefcase. Then I moved to the closet safe, a small fireproof box where we kept passports, birth certificates, and other essential documents. My grandmother's sapphire necklace was there, along with the pearl earrings Daniel had given me for our 10th anniversary. I placed them in a velvet pouch, then hesitated over his grandmother's wedding band, given to me when we married, a family heirloom he'd insisted I should have. Ethically, it should return to his family. I set it aside. In the bedroom, I packed enough clothes for a week, selecting practical work attire and comfortable basics. This wasn't a permanent departure. Not yet, but I needed distance to think clearly. I added my laptop, chargers, medications, and toiletries to the growing pile. The last items were the hardest: framed photographs from happier times, the handmade quilt from our bed, books with marginalia in both our handwriting. These weren't valuable in any monetary sense, but they represented the life we'd built, the happiness we'd once shared. I selected a few that mattered most, knowing I couldn't take everything. As I carried the last bag to my car, my phone rang. Daniel's face appeared on the screen. I stared at it, heart pounding, then rejected the call. Seconds later, a text appeared. Running late, meeting with Anderson team extended. Home by 9. Should I pick up dinner? The casual normalcy was jarring. I typed back, "Don't worry about it. Already ate." The lie came easily. I made one final sweep of the house, ensuring I hadn't forgotten anything essential, then locked the door behind me. In the driveway, I paused, gazing back at the home we'd so carefully created. Would I ever return to live here? Or was this goodbye to more than just a building? The uncertainty pressed against my chest, threatening to overwhelm the composure I'd maintained all day. I forced myself to breathe deeply, to focus on the immediate task, getting to Rebecca's, planning my next steps, surviving this initial phase of discovery and decision. The drive to Rebecca's took 20 minutes, city lights blurring through unexpected tears. She was waiting at the door when I arrived, taking bags from my hands without comment, leading me inside with quiet efficiency. Her apartment was warm and inviting, modern furnishings softened by art and books, the opposite of the minimalist aesthetic Daniel had always preferred. "Wine's poured," she said, guiding me to the living room. "And I ordered Thai food. It'll be here in 30 minutes. I sank onto her sofa, suddenly exhausted. "Thank you for everything." She handed me a generous glass of red wine. "Do you want to talk about it, or would you prefer distraction?" "Distraction first. I've been in my head all day." Rebecca nodded and launched into office gossip, the harmless kind about promotions, and office romances, nothing that required emotional investment. I let her words wash over me, grateful for the respite from my own thoughts. The food arrived, and we ate directly from cartons, a casual intimacy that felt comforting after the clinical discussions of assets and legal strategies. It wasn't until we'd cleared the containers that Rebecca broached the subject again. "So, what happens next?" I sipped my wine, considering. I need to decide when to confront Daniel. Jason recommended filing for emergency orders first, freezing accounts, securing property. But that means Daniel will be served papers before we've had any conversation. Is that a problem? He didn't exactly have a conversation with you before. Stealing your life savings. True. I stared into my glass. But 12 years together deserves at least the courtesy of face-to-face communication, doesn't it? Even if it's just to say it's over? Rebecca's expression softened. That's your decency talking. Would he offer you the same courtesy? The question hung between us. Would he? The Daniel I thought I knew, the man I married, certainly would have. But that man was a fiction, a carefully constructed facade concealing someone capable of elaborate betrayal. Probably not, I admitted. But I'm not making decisions based on his moral compass. I need to act according to my own. Rebecca nodded. Slowly. Fair enough, but promise me you won't let that decency put you at a disadvantage. Some people see kindness as weakness to exploit. I won't. I set down my glass with new resolve. But I need to look him in the eye when I end our marriage. I need to see his face when he realizes I know everything. And when will you do that? I considered the question carefully. Tomorrow. I'll meet with Jason in the morning to sign the retainer agreement and prepare the emergency motions. Then I'll confront Daniel tomorrow evening, after the legal wheels are already in motion. Do you want me there? For support or as a witness? I smiled at her loyalty. No. This needs to be between us. But I'll have my phone recording everything. Just in case. Rebecca squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, I'm here. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with remarkable grace. I don't feel graceful, I admitted. I feel like I'm operating on autopilot, making decisions because they need to be made, not because I'm emotionally ready for any of this. That's not autopilot, Em. That's strength. Anyone can function when life is easy. True character shows when everything falls apart. I leaned back against the sofa cushions, letting her words sink in. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps this mechanical forward movement wasn't detachment, but resilience. I had built a career on careful analysis and strategic planning. Now those same skills were helping me navigate personal catastrophe. I should check my email, I said, reaching for my laptop. I haven't looked at work messages since this morning. It can wait until tomorrow, Rebecca protested. You've dealt with enough today. But routine felt comforting, a small reclaiming of normalcy. I opened my inbox, scanning through client messages and internal memos. Nothing urgent, nothing that couldn't wait until a name caught my eye. Vanessa Mills. Subject line, meeting request. My hand froze over the trackpad. Rebecca, I said quietly. She emailed me. Rebecca was beside me instantly. The girlfriend? How did she get your work email? It's on the company website. I stared at the unopened message, heart pounding. Why would she contact me directly? Maybe she doesn't know you know about her. Or maybe she's trying to determine how much I know. I clicked open the message, Rebecca reading over my shoulder. Ms. Chen, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Vanessa Mills, owner of Pure Intention Yoga Studio. I'm reaching out because your husband Daniel suggested I contact you regarding potential financial advisory services for my business. He speaks very highly of your professional expertise and mentioned you might be willing to offer guidance on investment strategies for a growing small business. If you're accepting new clients, I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss how your services might benefit Pure Intention. I'm available at your convenience for an initial consultation. Warm regards, Vanessa Mills. We stared at the screen in stunned silence. The audacity was breathtaking, contacting me professionally while carrying on an affair with my husband, potentially funded by our stolen savings. Is she serious? Rebecca finally whispered. This has to be some kind of test. I read the message again, analyzing every word. It might be. Or Daniel might be using her to fish for information, to see if I suspect anything. Or, Rebecca suggested, he's so arrogant he thinks he can compartmentalize completely, keeping his affair separate from professionally connecting his wife and girlfriend. The third option seemed most plausible. Daniel had always excelled at mental compartmentalization, keeping work separate from home, friends separate from family, emotions separate from decisions. It was what made him successful in marketing, and apparently in deception as well. What are you going to do? Rebecca asked. Ignore it? I considered my options. Ignoring the email would be easiest emotionally but might signal awareness or suspicion. Responding professionally would maintain my cover until I was ready to act. Confronting Vanessa directly would be satisfying but strategically unsound. I'm going to answer it, I decided. Briefly, professionally, as if she's any potential client. It buys me time and maintains the illusion that I suspect nothing. Rebecca looked uncertain. Are you sure you can be that convincing? I've been convincing enough to make it through dinner with Daniel tonight if necessary. I can certainly manage a short email. I composed a response. Ms. Mills, thank you for your interest in financial advisory services. Due to current client commitments, I'm not accepting new accounts at this time. However, I'd be happy to refer you to several colleagues at Meridian who specialize in small business investment strategies. Please let me know if you'd like these referrals, and I'll connect you appropriately. Regards, Emily Chen, CFP Senior Financial Advisor, Meridian Financial Group. I showed the draft to Rebecca. Perfect, she said. Professional, appropriate, but creates no opening for further contact. I sent the email, then closed my laptop, feeling strangely energized by the exchange. There was something clarifying about seeing Vanessa's name in my inbox, about having concrete evidence of her existence beyond photographs and rental agreements. You know what this means, don't you? Rebecca said. She's not some fling. He's integrating her into his professional life, introducing her to his contacts. I know. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it reinforced my resolve. This isn't impulsive or temporary. He's building a life with her, using our money to do it. I stood up and paced Rebecca's living room, mind racing. Tomorrow can't come soon enough. I need to get those emergency orders filed. Immediately. Rebecca watched me with concern. Try to get some sleep first. You'll need a clear head. She was right, of course. Exhaustion was clouding my thinking, threatening the composure I'd need for tomorrow's confrontation. I followed her to the guest room, where she'd already placed my bags and turned down the bed. The bathroom's stocked with anything you might need, she said. And I'm just down the hall if you want to talk. I hugged her impulsively. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd manage, she said with confidence. But I'm glad you don't have to find out. After she left, I went through the motions of preparing for bed, washing my face, brushing my teeth, changing into pajamas. Each ordinary action felt somehow significant, markers of the last night of my marriage as I had known it. Tomorrow, everything would change irreversibly. I lay awake in Rebecca's guest room, staring at shadows on the ceiling, mentally rehearsing what I would say to Daniel. Should I lead with what I knew about Vanessa? Or the missing money? Should I be cold and factual, or let him see the pain he'd caused? Each approach had merits and risks. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, another text from Daniel. Are you coming home tonight? Getting worried? The concern seemed genuine, which only deepened the absurdity of the situation. How could he possibly believe our marriage was intact while living a double life? What psychological gymnastics allowed him to text his wife while funding an apartment for his girlfriend? I didn't reply. Let him worry. Let him wonder. Tomorrow he would have answers enough, and questions he hadn't thought to ask. Sleep eventually came in fitful bursts, dreams fragmented with images of empty bank accounts and unfamiliar apartments. I woke before dawn, momentarily disoriented in Rebecca's guest room before reality settled back into place. I showered and dressed with deliberate care, selecting a navy suit that projected confidence and authority. Today, I would reclaim my financial security, confront my husband's betrayal, and begin the process of rebuilding my life. The path forward wasn't clear yet, but the first steps were: meet with Jason, file the emergency motions, prepare for confrontation. Rebecca was already in the kitchen when I emerged, coffee brewed and breakfast laid out. You look ready for battle, she observed, handing me a steaming mug. I managed a small smile. In a way, I am. As I sipped my coffee, watching morning light spill across Rebecca's kitchen counters, a strange calm settled over me. Yesterday had been about discovery. Painful, disorienting revelations that had shaken my world. Today would be about decisions, clear, strategic choices that would shape what came next. Daniel had spent our life savings on his girlfriend, believing I would never discover his betrayal or find the strength to confront it. But I had been preparing for years without even realizing, at building my career, maintaining my independence, creating safety nets he knew nothing about. Now it was time to use them. Jason's office was already bustling when I arrived at 8:30. Paralegals moving with purpose between conference rooms, phones ringing persistently in the background. The energy felt appropriate for what lay ahead, a day of decisive action. Jason met me in the same sleek conference room as yesterday, but today his demeanor was different. The sympathetic counselor had transformed into a strategic litigator, prepared for battle. "I've drafted the emergency motions," he said, sliding a thick folder across the polished table. "Temporary restraining orders for all financial accounts, prohibition against disposing of marital assets, exclusive use of the marital residence for you, and preliminary financial disclosure requirements." I leafed through the documents, recognizing legal language from yesterday's discussions, but now formalized into court filings with my name at the top. Emily Chen v. Daniel Chen. The stark opposition of our names on official documents made this more real than any discovery or conversation had. "Once I sign these, what happens?" I asked, pen hovering over the signature line. "My team files immediately with the county court. A judge typically reviews emergency motions within 24 hours. If granted, and given the substantial transfer of funds I believe they will be, Daniel will be served with both the divorce petition and the temporary orders." "Oh, how quickly will he be served?" "We can request expedited service, most likely by tomorrow afternoon, possibly sooner." I nodded slowly, calculating timelines. That gave me tonight to confront Daniel personally, to see his face when I told him I knew everything, before legal machinery took over the process. "And the funds he's already transferred?" Jason's expression grew more serious. "That's complicated. The temporary orders prevent further dissipation, but recovering what's already gone requires additional steps. We'll file for comprehensive financial disclosure, depose Daniel about the transfers, and potentially subpoena bank records for the account you identified." "And if he's already spent it, or transferred it somewhere else?" "Then we trace it. Money leaves fingerprints. Emily, especially large sums. If he's purchased property, vehicles, investments, anything, we'll find it and petition for offset in the final settlement." I signed each document methodically, feeling a strange mixture of dread and relief with each signature. These papers would dismantle my marriage, but they would also protect what remained of my financial security. As I signed the final page, Jason's assistant entered with a sealed envelope. "This just arrived by courier for Ms. Chen. They were quite insistent it be delivered immediately." The envelope bore the Meridian Financial logo. Inside was a single sheet of company letterhead with a handwritten note from Eleanor. "Emily. Call me immediately. New information about Pacific Trust funds. Critical timing issues. EW." I showed the note to Jason, who immediately pushed his phone toward me. "Use my private line." Eleanor answered on the first ring. "Emily. Good, you got my message. Where are you?" "Jason's office. What's happened?" "One of my banking contacts flagged unusual activity on the Pacific Trust account you identified. There was a withdrawal of $295,000 yesterday afternoon, almost the entire balance." My stomach dropped. "Wire transfer?" "Cashier's checks. 3 of them, each just under $100,000. The implications were clear. Daniel was moving money again, converting it to less traceable forms. The timing couldn't be coincidence. Something had spooked him. Could he know I'm investigating? I asked, mind racing through possibilities. Possible, though my contact says the withdrawal was scheduled last week. It might be the next phase of whatever he's planning. I relayed the information to Jason, who was already making notes. This changes our approach, he said grimly. Cashier's checks are more difficult to trace than electronic transfers, but not impossible. We need to update the emergency motions to specifically address these instruments. While Jason revised the legal documents, I called the bank directly. Christopher Haynes, the branch manager I'd spoken with yesterday, confirmed Eleanor's information. The withdrawal was processed. By our central branch, he explained. 3 cashier's checks made payable to Shoreline Development Partners, LLC. I scribbled the name and asked Christopher to send any available documentation on the transaction to Jason's office. When I ended the call, Jason was already searching the business entity database on his computer. Shoreline Development Partners, LLC, he read. Registered 6 months ago. Principal office listed at... He paused, eyes narrowing. 1420 Riverpoint Boulevard. That's the Riverpoint Towers address, I finished. The same building where Daniel and Vanessa have their apartment. Jason's expression hardened. He's not just funding a love nest. He's investing in property development with your marital assets. The revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the situation. This wasn't merely an affair with money diverted to fund it. This was a calculated business venture. Daniel and Vanessa weren't just romantic partners. They were financial ones, building something together with resources that rightfully belonged in part to me. Modify the motions, I said, voice steady despite the anger building inside me. I want everything frozen. The LLC, the development project, whatever they're building. Jason nodded approvingly. We'll add specific language regarding business, entities and development projects. But Emily, he hesitated. This level of financial entanglement suggests advanced planning. 6 months ago would be around when the LLC was formed. This affair has likely been going on longer than you initially thought. The timeline clicked into place with awful clarity. The apartment lease signed 4 months ago. The LLC formed 6 months ago. The first major transfers to the Pacific Trust account beginning 7 months ago. Daniel had been systematically extracting himself from our marriage, financially, if not yet legally, for over half a year. I need to confront him tonight, I said, the words emerging with unexpected force. Before he moves any more money. Before he creates any more business entities. Jason looked concerned. Confrontation creates risk. Once he knows you're aware of the transfers, he may accelerate whatever he's planning. He already is accelerating, I pointed out. Almost $300,000 in cashier's checks yesterday? He's not waiting for anything, and I need answers before this goes any further. After a moment's consideration, Jason nodded reluctantly. If you're determined to confront him, let's establish some ground rules. First, record everything. Colorado is a one-party consent state for recordings, so you don't need his permission. Second, don't mention the legal filings. That information could cause him to hide additional assets before service. Third, and most importantly, have an exit strategy if things become volatile. The suggestion of potential violence hadn't occurred. To me, Daniel had never been physically aggressive in our 12 years together, but then again, he'd never been caught embezzling our life savings either. I don't think he would. I began, then stopped, realizing how meaningless such assurances had become. I didn't really know Daniel at all, did I? Jason seemed to read my thoughts. People become unpredictable when cornered, not suggesting he's dangerous, just advocating caution. I agreed to his conditions and spent the next hour revising the emergency motions with his team, adding specific language about the LLC and cashier's checks. By noon, the updated documents were filed with the court, and I emerged from Jason's office into bright spring sunshine that seemed incongruous with my emotional state. Rebecca called as I walked to my car. How did it go with Jason? I summarized the morning's developments, the legal filings, the discovery of the cashier's checks, the shoreline development connection. So he's not just sleeping with her, Rebecca said slowly. They're business partners. Apparently. And you're still planning to confront him tonight? Yes. I need to know how deep this goes, Rebecca. I need to hear it from him directly. She was quiet for a moment. Will you come back to my place afterward? I don't think you should be alone, regardless of how it goes. The offer was tempting, but I shook my head even though she couldn't. See me. I might need to stay at the house depending on what happens, but I promise to call you immediately after. I'll be waiting up, no matter how late. Back at Meridian, I found it impossible to focus on client portfolios or market analyses. My mind kept circling back to Daniel and Vanessa, to cashier's checks and limited liability companies, to the elaborate deception that had been unfolding right under my nose for months. At 3 o'clock, I gave up the pretense of working and left early, driving aimlessly through the city while formulating what I would say to Daniel. Should I lead with what I knew about Vanessa or the financial transfers? Should I present evidence immediately or give him the opportunity to lie first? Eventually, I found myself at Lakeshore Park again, drawn to its tranquility as my internal chaos mounted. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water as I walked along the path, rehearsing confrontations in my head that ranged from icy composure to righteous fury. By 6 o'clock, I had settled on an approach, direct but controlled, revealing my knowledge gradually rather than all at once. I wanted to see how much Daniel would admit unprompted, how many lies he would tell before realizing the game was up. I drove home with my heart pounding so loudly I could feel it in my fingertips. Daniel's car was already in the driveway, an unusual occurrence for a weeknight. Typically, he didn't arrive until after 7, citing client meetings or work commitments. The house smelled of cooking when I entered, another anomaly. Daniel rarely prepared meals, claiming limited culinary skills despite my attempts to teach him basic recipes. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, wine glass in hand, smile too bright to be natural. There you are, I was getting worried. I set down my bag, studying him carefully. His casual demeanor seemed forced, the concern in his voice at odds with the tension evident in his shoulders. He knew something was wrong, but was attempting to maintain our usual dynamic. I had meetings, I said, the half-truth coming easily. What's the occasion? I gestured toward the kitchen, where I could see multiple pots simmering on the stove. Just thought I'd surprise you. You've seemed stressed lately. He offered me a glass of wine, an expensive Bordeaux we usually reserved for special occasions. I accepted it, using the moment to activate the recording app on my phone as Jason had suggested. That's thoughtful, I said, following him into the kitchen. A proper dinner was laid out. Steaks marinating, vegetables chopped, table set with our best dishes. Clearly an attempt to create a specific atmosphere, though for what purpose I couldn't yet determine. How was your day? He asked, stirring. Something that smelled of garlic and herbs. Illuminating, I answered honestly. Yours? Productive. The Anderson campaign is finally back on track. Another lie delivered with practiced ease. I sipped my wine, watching him move around the kitchen with unusual energy. What was this performance meant to accomplish? Was he setting the stage for some announcement? Or attempting to distract me from something? Daniel, I said finally, unable to maintain the charade any longer. We need to talk. His movement slowed momentarily, a barely perceptible hesitation, before he resumed stirring. About what? About the money you transferred out of our joint savings account. The wooden spoon froze mid-stir. For several seconds, Daniel remained perfectly still, his back to me, before carefully setting down the utensil and turning to face me. His expression cycled rapidly through surprise, calculation, and then concern. What transfer? He asked, voice steady but eyes wary. I took another sip of wine, maintaining eye contact. The $320,000 you moved from our joint savings to your private account at Pacific Trust. His face registered genuine shock, not at the transfer itself. He knew exactly what he'd done, but at my knowledge of it. He recovered quickly, expression shifting to something conciliatory, almost regretful. Emily, I was going to tell you about that. It's a temporary reallocation for a time-sensitive investment opportunity. The returns will benefit both of us. The smooth explanation might have been convincing if I hadn't seen the LLC documents, if I hadn't found the apartment lease with Vanessa's name alongside his. Which investment opportunity? I pressed. Shoreline Development Partners? His momentary stillness confirmed everything before he could formulate a response. When he finally spoke, his voice had hardened slightly. How do you know about Shoreline? The same way I know about the apartment at Riverpoint Towers. The same way I know about Vanessa Mills. The wine glass in his hand trembled slightly. He set it down with deliberate care, buying time to calibrate his response. When he looked up, his expression had transformed entirely. The mask of concerned husband replaced by something colder, more calculating. You've been investigating? Me. Not a question, but an accusation. I've been protecting myself, I corrected, which became necessary when my husband stole our life savings. I didn't steal anything, he snapped, defensive now. Those funds are as much mine as yours, and this isn't what you think. Then explain it to me, Daniel. Explain why you've been systematically transferring money for months. Explain the luxury apartment lease with another woman's name on it. Explain the cashier's checks to an LLC registered at the same address. Each question landed like a physical blow. Daniel's composure cracked further with each one, his carefully constructed narrative disintegrating in real time. You had no right to go through my private files, he said finally, deflecting instead of answering. And you had no right to empty our joint accounts without discussion. You had no right to use our marital assets to fund a real estate venture with your girlfriend. She's not, he began, then stopped, reconsidering. This is business, Emily. Yes, Vanessa and I are partners in Shoreline Development, but it's a legitimate investment opportunity. We're developing waterfront properties that will triple in value within 5 years. While living together in a $6,800 per month apartment? I challenged. That's quite a business expense. His jaw tightened. Our personal relationship is separate from the business arrangement. But both are funded with our marital assets, I pointed out. Assets that legally belong to both of us, regardless of whose name is on the account. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. You're making this into something sordid when it's just business strategy. I didn't tell you because you're risk-averse. You would have objected to the capital commitment without understanding the potential returns. The condescension in his tone ignited something fiery within me. Don't insult my intelligence. I'm a financial analyst with 16 years of experience. If this were truly a sound investment opportunity, you would have presented it professionally, with projections and risk assessments. Instead, you drained our accounts secretly and established a hidden life with another woman. It wasn't like that, he insisted, but the defense sounded hollow even to him. Then what was it like, Daniel? Help me understand how my husband of 12 years decided that embezzlement and deception were acceptable business practices. He flinched at embezzlement, a flash of genuine alarm crossing his features. That's an extreme characterization. Is it? You systematically transferred marital funds to a private account, then converted those funds to cashier's checks payable to a business entity you created without my knowledge or consent. In any corporate context, that would be textbook embezzlement. The legal framing seemed to penetrate his defenses. For the first time since our confrontation began, uncertainty crept into his expression. I intended to bring you in once the preliminary phases were established. The timing of the opportunity didn't allow for lengthy consultations. The timing, I repeated skeptically. The LLC was registered 6 months ago, Daniel. The apartment lease was signed 4 months ago. You've had ample time for consultation. He stared at me, recalculating his position as the extent of my knowledge became clear. The kitchen fell silent except for the simmer of forgotten food on the stove. The elaborate dinner he'd planned now seemed absurd against the backdrop of our disintegrating marriage. "What do you want?" he asked finally, voice hollow. The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Restoration of the funds? Dissolution of his business partnership with Vanessa? A time machine to undo the betrayal? "I want the truth," I said. "All of it. How long has this been going on? How much money have you diverted? What exactly are you building with Vanessa?" Daniel leaned against the counter, shoulders slumping, slightly. Whether from genuine remorse or simply the fatigue of maintaining his deception, I couldn't tell. "Vanessa and I met at a marketing event for her yoga studio 14 months ago," he began, each word measured. "The business partnership developed first. She had connections to waterfront property owners willing to sell below market value. I had marketing expertise and capital access. Shoreline development was the logical outcome. And the personal relationship?" He hesitated. "That evolved gradually. We were spending time together on business matters and—" "You developed feelings," I finished when he trailed off. "When did you decide to leave me, Daniel? Was that gradual too? Or did you make that decision the moment you met her?" "I never—" he started, then stopped himself, reconsidering. "I wasn't planning to leave, not explicitly. I was creating options." The admission stunned me with its callousness. "Options," I repeated, "like whether to stay in your marriage or start a new life with your business partner. And our joint savings was just venture capital for whichever option you ultimately chose." He didn't deny it, which was answer enough. "When did you sign the apartment lease?" I asked, needing to understand the timeline fully. "January, but it's primarily for business meetings. River Point is centrally located for the properties. We're developing." Another lie, transparent in its desperation. "Business meetings don't require king-sized beds and matching bathrobes, Daniel." I saw the lease. I saw the furniture delivery receipts. His expression hardened again. "You've been thorough. Unlike you, I do my due diligence." The implied criticism struck a nerve. "This development project is completely viable," he insisted. "The initial properties are already under contract. We're working with architects on waterfront condominiums that will sell for 3 times the land acquisition costs. Using whose money as startup capital?" "Mine," he said automatically, then caught himself. "Ours, but the returns will more than compensate for the initial investment. Were you planning to share those returns, or were they earmarked for your new life with Vanessa?" His silence answered more eloquently than words could have. I set down my wine glass, untouched. "Since our confrontation began, I'd like you to return the funds you transferred, all of them." Daniel laughed, a short, harsh sound without humor. "It's not that simple. The money's already allocated. Property purchases, architect retainers, permits, marketing materials. The project is in motion." "Then unallocate it," I said flatly. "Sell the properties, cancel the contracts, liquidate whatever you've acquired with our savings." "That's not possible. We'd lose everything, all the initial investment plus the projected returns." "You should have considered that before stealing from our joint accounts." His expression darkened. "I didn't steal anything. Those funds were as much mine as yours. Then you should have discussed their use with me, your financial partner of 12 years, instead of unilaterally deciding to invest them in a venture with your girlfriend." We stared at each other across the kitchen island, the remains of his elaborate dinner setup between us, a tableau of domestic harmony now revealed as mere stage dressing. "What happens now?" he asked, voice unexpectedly vulnerable. Are you filing for divorce? The direct question required a direct answer. Yes? He nodded slowly, as if he'd been expecting this conclusion despite his attempts to justify his actions. When? The petition has already been filed, I said, deciding there was no longer any strategic advantage in concealing this fact. Along with emergency motions to freeze all accounts and prevent further dissipation of assets. This information visibly startled him. He straightened, alarm replacing resignation. You've already involved lawyers, without even talking to me first? Just as you involved Vanessa in our finances without talking to me first, I countered. The difference is that my actions are legally defensible. This is extreme, Emily. We could have worked something out privately. Like what? A payment plan for the money you've already spent? Visitation rights to the marital assets you've diverted to your girlfriend's business? My sarcasm struck home. Daniel's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, a cold anger that transformed his familiar features into those of a stranger. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. The legal fees alone will consume whatever. Assets remain. No one wins in a contested divorce. This became contested the moment you decided our life savings would be better invested in shoreline development than in our shared future. He shook his head, a gesture of frustration rather than denial. You're making a mistake. The development project is viable, more than viable. It could double or triple your investment if you'd just be patient. My investment, I repeated, emphasizing the pronoun. So you acknowledge the funds rightfully belong to both of us. Daniel realized his tactical error too late. Of course they do. That's my point. We both stand to benefit if the project proceeds as planned. And if I have no interest in being your business partner after discovering your deception? If I prefer my assets in cash rather than speculative real estate ventures controlled by my soon-to-be ex-husband and his girlfriend? The question hung between us, unanswerable in its essential reasonableness. Why would anyone choose to remain financially entangled with someone who had demonstrated such fundamental dishonesty? Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly, the fight visibly draining from him. What do you want from me, Emily? What would resolve this to your satisfaction? Return the money, I said simply. All of it. Then we can discuss an equitable division of assets through proper legal channels. I told you, it's not liquid anymore. It's committed to properties, contracts, development costs. Then liquidate what you can and prepare documentation on what you can't. Every dollar you transferred, every investment made, every contract signed, I want complete transparency. He hesitated, clearly calculating the implications of such disclosure. And if I provide that? Then the divorce proceeds with full financial transparency rather than court-ordered forensic accounting. It's the difference between an expensive, acrimonious process and a merely painful one. Daniel turned away, ostensibly to check the now overcooking food on the stove, but actually to conceal his expression as he processed this ultimatum. When he faced me again, his demeanor had shifted once more, the anger replaced by a brittle professionalism. I'll need time to compile the documentation. Some of the contracts have confidentiality clauses. Your attorney can work with mine to establish appropriate confidentiality protocols, I replied, matching his businesslike tone. But I expect preliminary documentation within 48 hours. And Vanessa? What about her? She's a partner in Shoreline, not just... He trailed off, apparently unwilling to define their relationship in my presence. Vanessa's involvement will need to be clarified as part of the financial disclosure. If she's contributed personal funds distinct from our marital assets, those contributions will be respected in any settlement. The clinical discussion of his affair in financial terms seemed to unsettle Daniel more than any emotional confrontation could have. He had prepared for tears, recriminations, perhaps even reconciliation attempts. but not for this cool, analytical dismantling of his carefully constructed double life. "Where does this leave us personally?" he asked finally, an unexpected vulnerability in his voice. The question pierced through my protective armor of professional detachment. Where did it leave us? Two strangers standing in a kitchen filled with the aroma of a dinner neither of us would eat, discussing the clinical dissolution of 12 years together. "That depends on you," I said truthfully. "On how forthcoming you are about the financial situation. On whether you choose to fight or cooperate. On whether you're willing to acknowledge the magnitude of your betrayal." He nodded slowly, accepting this assessment. "And tonight? Where will you stay?" "I'll be staying here," I said firmly. "This is my home too, regardless of what you've done. The guest room should suffice until more permanent arrangements are made." Daniel looked momentarily startled, as if he'd assumed I would be the one to leave. "Of course. I can take the guest room if you prefer." "That won't be necessary. I've already moved my essential items there." His eyes widened slightly at this revelation. "When did you—" "Yesterday, after discovering the apartment lease with Vanessa's name on it." Understanding dawned on his face. "So that's why you didn't come home last night. You already knew." "I knew enough," I confirmed. "Today, I learned the rest." An uncomfortable silence descended between us, filled with the weight of unasked questions and unspoken recriminations. The elaborate dinner Daniel had prepared continued cooking unattended, the rich aromas now seeming cloying rather than enticing. "I should." He gestured vaguely toward the stove. "Go ahead," I said, stepping back from the kitchen island. "I'm not hungry." I walked toward the stairs, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of forced civility. Before ascending, I turned back one last time. "Daniel." He looked up from where he was mechanically turning off burners, his movements automatic rather than purposeful. "The cashier's checks you withdrew yesterday, $295,000 in total. Where are they now?" The question clearly caught him off guard. He hesitated, weighing his response. "In my desk drawer," he admitted finally. "They haven't been delivered to Shoreline yet." "I'd like you to return them to the bank tomorrow. Have them redeposited into our joint account." His expression tightened. "Emily, those funds are earmarked for specific property acquisitions. The sellers are expecting payment by Friday." "Then they'll be disappointed," I said simply. "Or you'll need to find alternative financing that doesn't involve our marital assets." "This is vindictive," he protested. "You're sabotaging a viable business opportunity out of spite." "No," I corrected him. "I'm protecting my financial interests after discovering my husband's systematic misappropriation of joint funds." "The distinction matters, legally speaking." He had no answer for that, and I didn't wait for one. I continued upstairs to the guest room, closed the door behind me, and finally allowed the composure I'd maintained throughout our confrontation to crack. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling with delayed reaction to the surreal conversation we'd just had. For all my preparation, for all the evidence I'd gathered and legal advice I'd received, nothing had fully prepared me for the reality of confronting Daniel directly, of watching him transition from denial to justification to calculating cooperation within the span of 30 minutes. Most disturbing was how quickly he had abandoned the pretense of our marriage once he realized I knew everything. There had been no impassioned pleas to reconsider, no declarations of lingering affection despite his involvement with Vanessa. He had pivoted immediately to damage control, to minimizing his financial exposure rather than emotional loss. Had he ever loved me? Or had I simply been a convenient partner, a stable foundation from which he could launch increasingly risky ventures, personal and professional? I pulled out my phone and texted Rebecca as promised. "Confrontation complete. Staying at house tonight. We'll call tomorrow with details." Her response came immediately. "Are you safe? Do you need me to come over?" The concern brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I'm okay. He's more worried about the money than anything else. Not surprising. Call if anything changes. Proud. Of you. I set the phone aside and lay back on the unfamiliar bed in the room that had previously been reserved for occasional guests. Now it would be my temporary sanctuary while the legal machinery of divorce proceeded around me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Daniel's potential resistance to returning the cashier's checks, preliminary discussions between attorneys, practical decisions about living arrangements and asset protection. But tonight, in the stillness of this neutral territory, within what had once been our shared home, I allowed myself to simply breathe. Daniel had spent our life savings on his girlfriend, believing I would never discover his betrayal or find the strength to confront it. But I had been preparing for years, building professional expertise and emotional resilience that now served as my foundation during this upheaval. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same clear-eyed determination that had carried me through today's confrontation, not with anger or vindictiveness, but with the quiet certainty that I deserved better than deception, and the firm resolve to ensure I received it. Morning arrived with uncomfortable clarity. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains in the guest room, illuminating the new reality I had stepped into. The house was quiet. No sounds of Daniel's morning routine, no coffee brewing downstairs. Had he left already? Or was he, like me, trying to navigate this strange new territory of cohabitation amid separation? I checked my phone, 7:15 a.m., and already 3 emails from Jason. The first contained scanned copies of the emergency orders, signed by Judge Watkins last night and scheduled for service this morning. The second outlined a proposed temporary living arrangement to present to Daniel's attorney once he retained one. The third was more personal. Emily. How did the confrontation go? Are you safe and comfortable at the residence? Call my direct line when you have a moment to discuss. Next steps, particularly regarding the cashier's checks. So Jason. I dressed quickly in another crisp suit, armor for whatever the day might bring. The sound of movement downstairs confirmed Daniel was still home. I steeled myself before descending, unsure what version of my husband I would encounter. This morning, the cold strategist from last night's kitchen confrontation, or perhaps something new. I found him at the dining table, surrounded by papers, laptop open beside a half-empty coffee mug. He looked up when I entered, his expression unreadable. "Morning," he said, voice neutral. "There's coffee." I nodded acknowledgement, but moved, to prepare my own, rather than accepting his offering. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. "I've been reviewing the shoreline documentation," he continued, gesturing to the papers spread before him. "Preparing the disclosure you requested." The cooperative approach was unexpected. I studied him carefully as I poured my coffee. "Thank you, that's helpful." "I spoke with Vanessa last night," he added, watching for my reaction. "She's agreed to provide her financial contributions for full transparency." The mention of her name in our dining room sent an unexpected jolt through me. Not jealousy exactly, but the disorienting sensation of parallel realities colliding. This woman I had never met had become intricately entangled in my life, my finances, my future. "I appreciate that," I managed, maintaining professional composure. "And the cashier's checks?" Daniel hesitated, fingers tapping restlessly on a document. "That's more complicated. As I explained last night, those funds are committed to property acquisition scheduled for completion this week. Withdrawing now would forfeit significant earnest money and potentially expose us to legal action from the sellers." "Us?" I repeated, pointedly. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Shoreline Development, which, given your position that these are marital assets, means you as well." It was a clever reconfiguration of the situation, attempting to align my financial interests with the very project funded by misappropriated money. I set my coffee down, considering my response carefully. I understand your concern about the contracts, I said finally. But those agreements were made without my knowledge or consent, using funds that legally required joint approval for withdrawal. Any liability rests with you and Shoreline, not with me personally. The courts might see it differently, he argued, especially since you're now aware of the situation, but choosing to potentially cause financial harm by forcing withdrawal. The legal maneuvering was familiar territory. I'd anticipated this response after consulting with Jason yesterday. My attorneys disagree. Their position is that returning misappropriated funds to their original accounts represents the proper remedy for unauthorized transfer, regardless of subsequent commitments made with those funds. Daniel's expression tightened at the plural, attorneys, clearly calculating the escalation this represented. You've retained multiple lawyers? A divorce attorney and a financial specialist, I confirmed, given the complexity of the situation. He nodded slowly, processing this information. I see. Silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of decisions already made and consequences yet to unfold. I sipped my coffee, waiting. Daniel had always been the first to break uncomfortable silences in our marriage, a personality trait I could now use strategically. I have a counter-proposal, he said finally. The property acquisition proceeds as planned, with full documentation and transparency. You receive 50% ownership in Shoreline Development, with equal voting rights on all future decisions. This preserves the investment potential while addressing your concerns about financial misappropriation. The offer was almost insulting in its presumption. You're suggesting I become business partners with you and Vanessa after discovering you've been systematically deceiving me for months? Business is separate from personal matters, he insisted. The development opportunity is legitimate and potentially very profitable. Refusing it out of emotional reaction would be financially irrational. What would be irrational, I countered, would be entering a complex business relationship with partners who have already demonstrated profound ethical deficiencies and conflicts of interest. His jaw tightened. That's unnecessarily harsh. Is it? You diverted marital assets without consent, established a competing financial entity without disclosure, and entered into property contracts without authorization. Those aren't personal grievances, Daniel. They're fundamental breaches of fiduciary responsibility. The corporate framing seemed to unsettle him more than emotional appeals could have. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Service of process scheduled for 9:30 a.m. at your residence. Are you home? Might want to be elsewhere. I glanced at the time. 8:47 a.m. If I wanted to avoid witnessing Daniel being served with divorce papers, I needed to leave immediately. Part of me was tempted to stay, to see his reaction when confronted with legal reality rather than theoretical discussion. But professional instinct prevailed. Nothing productive would come from such a confrontation. I need to get to the office, I said, gathering my things. We can continue this discussion later. Daniel looked surprised by my abrupt withdrawal. What about the cashier's checks? We need to resolve this today if the property closing is to proceed on schedule. I've made my position clear, I replied. Return the funds to our joint account. If you choose not to, be prepared for the legal consequences outlined in the emergency orders. What emergency orders? His confusion was genuine. He hadn't been served yet. You'll be receiving some documentation today that clarifies the situation, I said, moving toward the door. We can discuss your questions afterward. His expression darkened with suspicion. Emily, what have you done? I paused at the threshold, meeting his gaze directly. What was necessary to protect my interests after discovering your deception? Nothing more. Nothing less. I left before he could respond, the confrontation postponed, but inevitable. In my car, I called Jason to confirm Daniel would be home for service of process, then headed not to Meridian but to Rebecca's apartment as we had arranged yesterday. She answered the door in workout clothes, clearly having delayed her morning run to accommodate my arrival. "How was the night from hell?" she asked, ushering me inside. "Surprisingly calm," I admitted, settling onto her couch. We established separate territories and avoided further confrontation. This morning was businesslike. "Businesslike?" she repeated skeptically. "After what he did?" "He's trying to salvage the development project. Offered me 50%. Ownership in Shoreline as a compromise." Rebecca's eyebrows shot up. "Working with him and Yoga Barbie? That's his solution?" Despite everything, the nickname startled a laugh from me. Essentially, he's framing it as the rational financial decision separate from personal considerations. "Unbelievable," she muttered, though actually perfectly believable from Daniel. He's always valued money over emotional concerns. The observation stung with its accuracy. Throughout our marriage, Daniel had approached most situations through a cost-benefit lens, weighing financial implications before emotional ones. I had admired this pragmatism once, seeing it as complementary to my more balanced approach. Now it felt cold, calculating, revealing a fundamental value misalignment I had somehow overlooked for years. "He's being served with the divorce petition and emergency orders in about 30 minutes, I said, checking my watch. "I needed to be elsewhere when it happens." Rebecca nodded, understanding. "Smart. What happens after he's served?" "Legally? He'll have 20 days to respond to the petition and immediate compliance requirements for the emergency orders, meaning he can't transfer or dispose of any additional assets, including those cashier's checks." "And practically?" I sighed, the weight of uncertainty settling over me again. "That depends on him. He could fight everything, hire aggressive counsel, drag this out for months. Or he could recognize the evidence against him is substantial and opt for negotiated settlement. Which do you think he'll choose? Based on this morning's financial maneuvering, he'll fight, but strategically, looking for compromises that preserve the development project rather than scorched earth litigation." Rebecca studied me for a moment. "You sound almost impressed by his approach." "Not impressed," I clarified. "Just familiar with it. After 12 years, I know how Daniel operates. He's always calculating maximum return for minimum investment, emotional or financial." My phone buzzed. Jason again. "Process server confirms successful delivery of documents to Daniel Chen at 9:32 a.m. He accepted service without incident." Without incident. The clinical phrasing seemed incongruous with what must have been a profound personal moment. My husband being handed legal papers ending our marriage, freezing our assets, potentially derailing his carefully constructed plans with Vanessa. Had he maintained his composure? Or had the mask slipped once the server departed? Almost immediately, my phone rang. Daniel. I let it go to voicemail, not yet ready for that conversation. The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, negotiations, and practical adjustments to my new reality. Daniel moved out 3 days after being served, relocating to a downtown apartment while I remained in our house. The initial hostility gradually gave way to a cold professionalism that made interactions tolerable, if not comfortable. True to my prediction, Daniel opted for strategic cooperation rather than all-out warfare. The cashier's checks were returned to our joint account as ordered by the court. Comprehensive financial disclosure revealed the full extent of Shoreline development, a legitimate business venture with genuine potential, funded by gradually increasing transfers from our joint accounts over 7 months. The most unexpected development came during depositions when Vanessa Mills testified under oath that she had been unaware of the source of Daniel's investment capital. According to her testimony, He had represented the funds as personal assets, accumulated before our marriage, a fiction she only discovered after I confronted him with evidence of the transfers. I would never knowingly participate in misappropriation of marital assets, she stated firmly, looking directly at me rather than the attorneys questioning her. My relationship with Daniel began as a professional partnership. The romantic aspect developed later, but I was led to believe his financial situation was entirely transparent and ethical. Her directness was surprisingly disarming. Whether calculated or genuine, her testimony shifted my perception of her from willing accomplice to fellow victim of Daniel's compartmentalized ethics. The realization didn't lessen the pain of his betrayal, but added complexity to the narrative I had constructed. By week 8, settlement negotiations had produced a framework agreeable to both sides. I would retain our house and my retirement accounts intact. Daniel would keep his retirement funds and receive a reduced ownership percentage in Shoreline Development. The remaining joint assets would be divided equitably, with Daniel paying me an additional settlement to compensate for the financial misconduct documented during discovery. As the process moved toward final resolution, I found myself experiencing unexpected moments of clarity about our relationship. Daniel and I had functioned efficiently as financial partners, our complementary approaches to money management creating stability and growth throughout our marriage. But something essential had been missing, an emotional connection deep enough to withstand temptation, a shared vision extending beyond material success. Eleanor Wright, my financial advisor turned divorce confidant, articulated this with characteristic precision during one of our strategy sessions. You and Daniel built a business partnership disguised as a marriage, she observed. Efficient, productive, mutually beneficial, but fundamentally transactional. When a more appealing business opportunity appeared, he reallocated resources accordingly. The assessment was harsh but clarifying. We had indeed approached marriage like a joint venture, measuring success in accumulated assets rather than emotional fulfillment. Perhaps that was why I had instinctively responded to his betrayal with financial countermeasures rather than emotional appeals. We had always spoken the language of transactions more fluently than that of feelings. 3 months after discovering the transferred funds, I sat across from Daniel in our mediator's office, finalizing settlement details before the court appearance that would legally end our marriage. The tension that had characterized our early negotiations had evolved into something more resigned, 2 people concluding a contract that no longer served its intended purpose. My attorney says the judge will likely approve everything as presented, Daniel said during a break in the proceedings. Clean dissolution within 30 days. I nodded, studying his face for signs of the man I had married. He looked older. Somehow, the confident sharpness of his features softened by stress and consequences. That's good. Efficient closure. He smiled faintly at my choice of words. Efficient. Yes. We always valued that, didn't we? The observation carried no bitterness, only reflection. We did, I agreed. Sometimes at the expense of other considerations. Daniel looked away briefly, then met my eyes with unusual directness. For what it's worth, I never intended to hurt you. That sounds inadequate, even offensive given what happened. But it's true. I believe you, I said, surprising myself with the realization that I did. You didn't set out to cause pain. You simply didn't factor it into your calculations when other opportunities appeared more promising. He flinched slightly at the assessment but didn't contradict it. I've been seeing someone, he said after a moment. A therapist, not... He trailed off, avoiding Vanessa's name. That's good, I said sincerely. Helpful? Uncomfortably so. He hesitated, then added, She suggests I've spent my life treating relationships as transactions, assessing value, maximizing returns, minimizing emotional investment. The insight matched my own evolving understanding so precisely that I smiled despite myself. Perceptive therapist. She also says I've avoided genuine intimacy by seeking partners who wouldn't demand it, who would accept competence and stability in place of vulnerability. He looked at me carefully. I don't say that to suggest you were somehow responsible for my choices, only that I'm beginning to understand patterns I never recognized before. The conversation had entered territory we had rarely explored during our marriage, honest reflection on emotional dynamics rather than practical considerations. It felt strange, but not entirely unwelcome. I've been doing some reflecting too, I admitted, about what I accepted, what I overlooked. I valued our stability so highly that I ignored signs of fundamental disconnection. Daniel nodded slowly. We built something that worked on many levels, just not all of them. The mediator returned. Before I could respond, bringing us back to the practical matters of asset division and financial settlements. But something had shifted subtly. A mutual acknowledgement that our failure wasn't simply about misappropriated funds or hidden relationships, but about a deeper misalignment that had been present long before either transgression. The final court. Appearance 3 weeks later was anticlimactic. Brief statements, judicial review of settlement terms, official pronouncement of dissolution. Daniel and I exchanged formal nods as we exited the courtroom, no longer husband and wife, but former partners with a concluded contract. Rebecca waited for me outside, having insisted on accompanying me despite my assurances that I could handle the proceedings alone. "How do you feel?" she asked as we walked toward the parking garage. I considered the question carefully. "Lighter?" I said finally. Like I've set down something I've been carrying for years without realizing its weight. Her expression softened with understanding. "That's probably the healthiest response possible. No regrets." "About ending the marriage? No. About parts of the journey?" "Of course. 12 years is a significant investment of life." "Always the analyst," she teased gently. "Even about your own emotions." I smiled, acknowledging the observation. "It's who I am, for better or worse." "For better," Rebecca said firmly. "Your analytical mind saved you from financial devastation. Your emotional intelligence is helping you process the experience constructively rather than destructively. That's a powerful combination, Em." Her words stayed with me as I drove home, not to the Craftsman house, which I had decided to sell despite retaining ownership in the settlement, but to my new condominium overlooking Westlake Harbor. The space was smaller but entirely mine, decorated according to my preferences rather than compromises. As evening settled over the water, I stood on my balcony reflecting on the journey of the past months. Daniel had spent our life savings on his girlfriend, believing I would never discover his betrayal or find the strength to confront it. But I had been preparing for years, building professional expertise and emotional resilience that served as my foundation during this upheaval. The financial recovery had been remarkably complete. Emergency orders, comprehensive disclosure, negotiated settlement, all resulting in equitable restoration of assets. The emotional recovery was ongoing but progressing with similar thoroughness, each week bringing new insights about patterns I had accepted and changes I now embraced. Most importantly, I had discovered capabilities within myself that might have remained dormant without the catalyst of crisis. I had navigated betrayal without surrendering to bitterness, protected my interests without descending into vindictiveness, and emerged with greater clarity about both my past choices and future possibilities. As darkness fell over the harbor, lights from boats and buildings reflecting on the water's surface, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent during the final years of my marriage. Not because everything was resolved, or because pain had been erased, but because I had walked through fire and emerged transformed rather than destroyed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A demanding client portfolio at Meridian, decisions about long-term investments, perhaps eventually considerations about new relationships. But whatever came next, I would face it with hard-won wisdom about what I valued, what I required, and what I could overcome. Daniel had spent our life savings on his girlfriend, but in doing so, he had inadvertently given me something far more valuable: the opportunity to discover my own worth beyond the constraints of our efficient but incomplete partnership. It wasn't the future I had planned, but standing on my balcony in the gathering darkness, I found myself unexpectedly grateful for the chance to create something entirely new. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.